are all having a great Friday. So there was a lot discussed in the Barry Morphew motions hearing today, and so I thought I would just hop on here instead of doing a ton of thread on Twitter. I thought I could do a better and thorough kind of explanation of what happened in the courtroom in Fremont County on YouTube. So I do have a report at 9 o'clock on fox21news.com. I spoke with the Alliance, which is a domestic violence organization out of Salida, and I spoke with the executive director. She actually wrote a letter to Judge Ramsey Lama about the decision from a previous court hearing that no acts of domestic violence prior to Suzanne going missing can be brought up. So the Domestic Violence Organization Alliance was upset about that. I have more information on fox21news.com if you want to check it out. I'll also be posting the video from our 9 o'clock newscast on there as well. So let's get into it. There was 8 witnesses that talked and took the stand, all called by the defense. Again, we're talking about Barry Morphew and his defense filed a motion for the case to get dismissed because of exculpatory evidence not being released to them, and then also recent comments made by a former CBI agent that was made in an internal affairs investigation into him, and his name was Joseph Cahill. So let's just go over kind of my notes. I do want to point out that every time I go to court, I kind of just sit back and kind of watch both sides what happens, and Barry Morphew or the daughters lead a prayer before the court proceeding begins. So I wanted to make that a note. The first witness that the defense called was Commander Alex Walker. He drafted the arrest affidavit. He was the one that did a lot of the search warrants and filed and authored most of the search warrants. He said he wrote over 100 arrest affidavits previously. And a lot of the testimony was about the timing of the arrest of Barry Morphew, because previously former agent, CBI agent Joseph Cahill, he had mentioned in his internal affairs investigation in an interview that, he thought the arrest of Barry Morphew was premature and that they weren't, quote, remotely ready to arrest Barry Morphew, and it was the worst decision that they could make. And so today, most of the testimony was about those comments. They interviewed the director of Colorado Bureau of Investigation. They interviewed the deputy director, which is like the second in command, and also Agent Cahill, as well as Agent Cahill's supervisor and his partner, Derek Graham, who is now the lead investigator for the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. But let's first talk about Commander Walker. He took the stand. He wasn't on the stand as long as Agent Cahill was, or former Agent Cahill was. Let me talk about... Iris Eaton is Barry Morphew's defense counsel attorney, and she asked Commander Walker questions about, was the arrest premature? And he said absolutely not. Did he know that Agent Graham or Agent Cahill didn't support the arrest? And he said no. Did he know about Agent Cahill making the comments about this is the worst decision and to be made, and if this case isn't remotely ready. And Commander Walker said absolutely not. He hadn't heard that until he read the internal affairs investigation that CBI did. And that was done because there was an accidental discharge of Cahill's gun, his issued weapon, and Agent Cahill was planning to resign the same day, supposedly, that his gun went off and shot him in the hand. So, because of that incident, CBI did an internal investigation into Cahill because of an accidental discharge at his home, if that makes sense. I will answer questions at the end, but if you want to go ahead and ask questions, I have mods that can send me questions, and if it's the timing, I can answer the questions, but if not, I'll try to get to all the questions at the very end. Let's see. I wrote about 15 pages of notes, but I'm going to try to do this quickly because it is a Friday night, and my husband wants to go see a movie. So, but I want to talk about what happened in court for you guys. So they talked about a statement that former CBI agent Cahill had mentioned about the erosion of framework of the investigation. And, Iris Eaton asked Commander Walker, did he know what that meant? And he said it might be in his mind, but not in ours, saying that it might have been an erosion of the framework of the investigation in Cahill's mind, but not in Investigator Walker's mind or the prosecution's mind. He said, without knowing more, I can't say if it's favorable or not to the defense. He asked if there was any. He was asked if there was any public pressure to arrest Morphew or any media pressure, and he says he pretty much doesn't pay attention to that. His focus is on, the investigation. He did mention that this case was catching worldwide attention. He was aware of the attention that it was, presenting, but it wasn't. That wasn't why they rushed to an arrest. Then they started talking about the 3 CODIS matches, and, he said that, again, Agent Cahill, he said that he would take care of it, and it was not a big deal, and so kind of that was that for the investigators. And, Iris Eaton wanted to know why wasn't there opinions from investigators on the several unknown male DNA that was in the arrest affidavit, as well as around the Morphew home, like the bike helmet, the bike handle, the bike seat, and things like that, and around the home that they found unknown male DNA. Why wasn't that, why wasn't there opinions made by investigators on that? And he said it didn't yield a difference, with probable cause. The facts lined up, and we move forward. Commander Walker said that. He even mentioned that he didn't think the CODIS hit was a big deal. Mark Holbert is from the DA, and he's cross-examining Commander Walker. He asked if there was ever discussions with the sheriff and undersheriff in regards to what they were being questioned today. He said no. Did he tell you what to say, or did you tell him what to say? And Commander Walker said, absolutely not. And he asked, did Agent Cahill ever express that, Agent Cahill didn't think that Barry Morphew did it? And he said no. And then Mark Holbert is asking Agent K, or Commander Walker, did anyone, say you don't have enough probable cause? Talking about how former Agent Cahill, did he ever mention that he thought that there wasn't enough probable cause to make an arrest? And he said no. And then he was asked, did CBI support the arrest? And he said, correct. He said that he didn't support the timing. And so this is really when it started talking about the timing. And then Mark Holbert asked, did the Chief Justice support the arrest affidavit? And he said, yes. Has there been disagreements with law enforcement agencies previously? And he said, yes. And then there was no rebuttal by the defense. So the second witness is former CBI agent Joseph Cahill. And he walks in, and I can tell that his left arm, there's like a scar here, and he's kind of not walking. He's kind of holding it more so than, walking normal, I guess you could say. So when he took the stand for quite a while. Iris Eaton first asked him, what materials did you review for this? And he said the arrest affidavit modifications that he made. He was asked if you spoke to anyone previously before about this and what you're going to testify. And he said just his significant other and Agent Kobach and Agent Graham and his sister. And then he was asked, did you review the motion D17C? And he said, yes, within the past week. Yes. He gets emotional on the stand. And Iris Eaton is asking him questions about him getting shot in the hand. And that's when he was getting visibly emotional. The judge had to kind of stop the proceeding and, say, did you need water? He was asked if he needed tissues and things like that. But he said he could continue. Someone's asking, as far as the 3 CODIS hits, is there now a 4th hit as well? And that was not presented today or talked about today. The 3 CODIS hits were talked about, and I will get to that because it is really important to hit on. I'll get to that soon. He talked about how he's never been so stressed at work with any job other than this time frame of with the Morphew investigation as well as his military time. He was just extremely stressed. He said he was getting behind on making reports, and so when he was on military leave in March of 2021, that he was even trying to catch up on his reports from this investigation. And that could just be talking to a witness and then filing a report about what that witness said or pertained to the investigation. And so he said that he was kind of getting behind and that they were stretched thin. Everyone was stretched thin, he said. He was asked about, what do you mean about erosion? So these statements from his internal affairs investigation is on our Fox 21. You can read all of them on our Fox 21 website. And they actually had the audio clips of 14 of them. And one of the clips, let me just read it word by word. While I'm gone, I'm seeing the erosion of the framework that myself and Derek Graham put together. So he was asked, what do you mean by the erosion? He said, I think I'm referring to a dynamic we were building and trying to build. Everyone was stretched really thin. The framework is a structure of communication, continuity and having a strategic plan and having things more cohesive between the different agencies. Since it was a multi-agency investigation and agents were tasked with other cases as well. So on top of the Suzanne Morphew case, they were tasked with other cases as well. So he felt like that framework was eroding that they had built when he went off to do military training. He was in Phoenix, and he left in March of 2021. It was military leave. And he admitted on the stand that he didn't know that Barry Morphew was going to be arrested. I think he was told later. He said, I was writing reports while I was on military leave. There wasn't a lot of dialogue. I have limited communication with everyone. Maybe a phone call with Agent Graham is all he had during his military time. He was sent the arrest affidavit when he was in Arizona on military leave to revise. He was asked about what was his belief that wasn't continuity, like what was wrong with it. He said strategic planning of what needs to be done and review the things that had been done. So he's talking about the evidence that they were collecting. He felt like there wasn't a strategic plan and that it hadn't been done like he had wanted, and that they wanted time to review what they already had so then they could figure out where do they go next with the investigation. And they felt like Agent Cahill as well as Agent Graham felt like they needed more time. One of the concerns was Alex Walker did a ton of search warrants at the beginning of the case, beginning of the investigation, and that evidence had been gone through and digested, but there was still many more other things that needed to be reviewed and updated, like finances. He looked at the data, like talking about cell phone data, and that needed to be digested and reviewed as well. He said, I was disappointed about it, the arrest of Barry Morphew. It led to them speaking to their supervisors. He said, I disagreed with the timing. I didn't disagree with the arrest of Barry Morphew. And then Iris Eaton is asking him questions about, there's no body in this case. Was there blood found at all? He said no. Did you know about the Tempe CODIS DNA hit? And he said yes, at the time before the arrest. Did you know about the truck tires? The, what's it called? What is it called? The tracks near the bike scene. If those, someone help me out. The mold, that's not the right term, but the mold of the track tires, if they had come back, the cast, that's what it was, the casting of the tracks that they had found next to the bike, and that he didn't believe that those had come back from the lab. He was asked if any canines alerted to any deceased body near the home. He said no. Was there any of the excavations, was anything of relevance to the case found? He said no. This was interesting, which was kind of an accident by the defense. Iris Eaton started asking questions about mine searches in particular, and Cahill was saying, well, I don't think those mine searches came before the arrest of Barry Morphew. And Iris Eaton was like, oh yeah, you're right, those came after his arrest. So we now know that for sure they've been searching in mines for, I guess, Suzanne Morphew or any evidence that pertains to this case since Barry Morphew has been arrested. And then she asked if there was any admission of guilt from wiretapping his phone. And they said no. What about data points collected from Barry Morphew's truck to see where he's going? Has there been any investigative leads? And they said no. They interviewed Barry Morphew 34 times. There was no statements from his daughters that Barry Morphew murdered Suzanne Morphew, and he said no. Said a big portion of this in statements from the sheer number of people. I was behind on reports. He's talking about how they were, stretched thin. Okay, extracting, digesting, continue to build the... Okay, they said that no matter when the arrest happened, they're going to still continue to investigate. So they're still investigating to this day. And Agent Cahill kept saying, it is my opinion that blah, 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 blah. He kept saying, like, it is my opinion that the arrest should have waited. So again, he's trying to tell the court, this was only my opinion, and the opinion of Colorado Bureau of Investigation, if that makes sense, that the arrest of Barry Morphew should have waited. Agent Cahill had said, that there should have been other tasks done before the arrest. It was late in 2020 that his supervisor, Agent Kirby Lewis, became involved in the case. Dax, or radar, stop. Hold on real quick. Sorry, I saw my dog chewing on something he wasn't supposed to be chewing on. Okay, so they asked, if he knew that Barry Morphew and the daughters left to go to Mexico and they came back. And he said no, he didn't know. The reason why he said that the case and the investigation was remote, they weren't remotely ready to bring this to an arrest or to have an arrest. And that statement, let me read the whole statement. He said, aside from a public safety exception, this case is not even remotely ready for anybody to put this forward yet. And he explained his statement by saying that because of the arrest, they lost their ability to do further investigation as far as doing further interviews with Barry Morphew. Once the arrest came, he lawyered up and stopped talking to law enforcement. So it stopped all conversation with the defendant. Radar, stop. Come here. He was asked, even at the preliminary hearing, Agent Cahill felt like, even then, that the arrest should have waited. In his opinion, again, his opinion. He said, let me find that quote. Here's a statement he said in his internal investigation. A year down the road and jumping early in the court pool and the ripple effect is going to cause. The same with Derek Graham. So he's talking about this ripple effect, and people were like, the defense really wanted to know, what do you mean by this ripple effect? And he said, in my opinion, that we would have a strategic approach. Once we get to the court, you have to start meeting deadlines. So as soon as the arrest is made, there's a clock, there's deadlines, and there's for discovery and things like that. So he felt like if they had waited, if there was a strategic plan or approach, then they could have met their deadlines, is kind of what he's saying. Yeah, he said, I didn't feel confident based on everything that we had gone through to allow us to have the time to do other follow-ups. The arrest was premature. He said that there was pieces of the investigation, like gaps, that still needed to be filled. He was asked, were those opinions shared with the defense? And he said no. Would those be favorable for the defense? And he said, the underlying reasons of the opinions, I don't know how to answer that. Our opinions are just that, opinions. Then they talked about how District Attorney Linda Stanley complained about Cahill's conduct during the preliminary hearing. And Agent Cahill said, it hasn't been told to me what it was as far as the conduct goes. And he said, my assumption was that the way I testify, she didn't like. And after that, the DA didn't want him participating on the Morphew case. He wanted to know and wanted to talk with DA Linda Stanley. And he even admits that I could have testified better on August 24th during the prelim. He said it wasn't to a professional quality like he should have. So now it comes up to about, he was supposed to be moved from the major crimes unit to marijuana. And that was questioned. And I'm going to kind of jump ahead to hearing from CBI director as well as the CBI deputy director about him moving from major crimes to marijuana, because from what the defense at first kind of thought about and asked about was, it seemed like after his preliminary hearing and after he testified and how bad it was, that he was taken off the case, and that's the reason why he was taken off the case. Well, we learned from CBI head honchos pretty much is that he was going to move from major crimes to marijuana before the prelim hearing even happened. That was already kind of in the works. It hadn't been finalized, but they were already making that decision that Agent Cahill would be moving to marijuana unit rather than stay on major crimes unit. So we learned that it was between Agent Graham and Agent Cahill to move to that marijuana unit. And because of Agent Cahill's skills with the military as well as his youth and ability, they thought that he would be the best person to move to the marijuana unit because of his ability to possibly have to, climb into the mountains to find marijuana busts and things like that. So they had already decided before the prelim that he would be moving to the marijuana unit. Okay. He admitted that he never told FBI agents Grusing and Harris about the concerns of Barry Morphew being arrested at the time he did. He knew of the probable cause back in May. He thought the defendant did murder Suzanne. He said, again, the communication had broken down and there wasn't really a strategic intent the group had been working towards before, like they had before he left for military leave. He felt like it was more procedural. He was asked, former Agent Cahill was asked if he knew if Barry Morphew was going to run, and he said no. He was asked if he ever told anyone about his opinion about the arrest, and he said no. It wasn't until the internal investigation in December that this whole worst decision, remotely ready, these statements about the premature arrest came about. He was really stressed out because of this case and the military and them getting sued. He also claimed that he kind of wanted to see the arrest, but he was on military leave, so he wasn't going to be there for the arrest. He was upset being pulled off the case, and I believe one of his superiors even asked, Linda Stanley, hey, could he be a consultant on the case if you don't want him, working on the case directly? And she didn't want that. He talked about how it was not only procedural, but he felt like it was organizational, that they needed to wait to have the arrest made. They needed to go through all the data, he said. And then he was asked, do you know if they have all the data, the defense? And he said no. He didn't think that all the interviews and evidence had been reviewed. He was asked, what was the rush to arrest Barry Morphew? And he said, I don't know. He doesn't think that our opinions were disregarded. He thought maybe there was a concern about him fleeing, that he was going to leave the state, Barry Morphew. So that was the end of former Agent Cahill on the stand. So now it's his partner, CBI agent Derek Graham. Someone's asking why, before I go into Derek Graham, someone's asking why was he fired? He accidentally, well, he wasn't fired, he resigned. Agent Cahill resigned. But before he did that, actually, I believe the same day he was planning to resign, he accidentally shot himself with his, CBI weapon in the hand at his house. So it was an accidental discharge. Okay, so Derek Graham, his partner, took the stand next, and he started working on the case on May 14th. He is now the lead investigator for Colorado Bureau of Investigation as of October 2021, so this is after the preliminary hearing. He hasn't listened to any of the audio recordings of Cahill's internal affairs investigation. He's seen the quotes in motion, reviewed some police reports because he didn't know what he would be asked in this hearing today. He was one of the first CBI agents to know of the arrest, so he was notified by Commander Walker, and so then he notified Agent Cahill. He was concerned about the timing. He said he wasn't upset, though. He knew that there was probable cause. He said that there was additional testing that needed to be done, wanted to make sure everything that had been collected had been taken to the CBI labs. There was always additional investigations as the case, continues and arises, but he felt like there could be more to be tested, wanted to ensure that the results could come back and analyze and review everything. He was asked, what additional testing needed to be done, and he said, just wanted to make sure that things taken from the Morphew's home would have come back with results. There wasn't anything in the investigation that showed Morphew didn't do it, he said. This is Agent Derek Graham. he still hasn't, he even admits he still hasn't read all of the reports from law enforcement. It was a massive amount of investigation over nearly a year. But he thought them arresting Barry Morphew was enough to alert his supervisor about the timing specifically. He thought that there was enough probable cause. He was out of state visiting his newly grandson. He wasn't upset that he wasn't going to be there for the arrest. He doesn't recall speaking to the district attorney about concerns of the timing of the arrest. This was new to him that Suzanne Morphew is still on CBI list of missing people. He didn't know that. Then the defense attorney was asking him, did you guys do a thorough investigation of the unknown male DNA from the bike handlebars, the bike brakes, the bike seat, the bike helmet? And he said, I wanted further testing done. Yes. He wanted to find Suzanne. Yes. They wanted to review phone data, wanted to look into Facebook friend requests. And he said he never looked on the media or public pressure. So this is when we talk about the glove box DNA. He said they just received results back yesterday. And it's from the Phoenix, Arizona, and it is excluded. And then also he talks about the Range Rover wasn't originally belonged to the Morphews, so that means the unknown male DNA could be a previous owner of someone that owned Suzanne Morphew's Range Rover. They talked about how experts' opinion on the DNA from the glove box, the Tempe, Arizona, the Phoenix, and the Chicago, it would be excluded as well. So it's ruled out, is what I'm saying. Those three, that was such a big piece of the preliminary hearing. They pretty much have ruled all of those CODIS matches or, partial matches as excluded. So they don't have to worry about that anymore. So it pretty much made the case stronger. It's not exculpatory evidence anymore. He doesn't remember ever hearing from Agent Cahill that this case was never, remotely ready to for the arrest. They spent a lot of time going back and forth to Salida driving together. He says he still doesn't have access to all the evidence and reports because Chaffee County Sheriff's Office is still the lead on this case. So now we're on to the fourth witness, which is Chris Shaffer. He is the Deputy Director of CBI, the investigations. He's the second highest ranked at CBI, his 27 years of law enforcement experience. He actually went to the crime scene at the Morphew home during the search in the early days. He was requested by Sheriff Speezy. This was interesting. They were actually called, I believe, May 11th, so less than 12 hours after Suzanne went missing. He did not interview witnesses. He didn't agree with the timing, but I guess he had previously talked to the sheriff. And, during that conversation with the sheriff, he had the final say. He was the lead investigator. he had said something to Sheriff Speezy like, my guys don't think it's good timing. They're under a time constraint. Whatever your decision is, I'll support you, though. You know, he talked about how once the arrest happens, the clock starts ticking. They wanted more time. He expressed that his agents wanted more time to get things done. Speezy did mention to him that he thought Morphew was going to flee. He can't recall him ever calling a sheriff or chief about an arrest, but said he talks with them frequently. He never talked to the DA. But both the highest ranked of CBI as well as the deputy director, Chris Shaffer, they both tried to convince Speezy to hold off on the arrest. Then they talked about Cahill's testimony at the preliminary hearing. He was told by multiple people that it was rough and hard to understand. He called Commander Walker and he agreed with how the comment about that his testimony, Cahill, was pretty rough. And then he had a conversation with Mark Holbert. He said that Cahill was being transferred to the marijuana unit prior to the preliminary hearing. He hadn't been notified yet. So Cahill hadn't even been notified yet about this move prior to the preliminary hearing. He did mention that he can't have an agent who can't testify be on the criminal investigation unit because they typically testify a lot in cases, and with marijuana unit, they don't testify as often. He was asked again by Chris Shaffer, the deputy director of investigations for CBI, asked Holbert as well as Walker, was it really that bad? And they agreed. He said it was way too long of an interview and detail about the court, or to the court. Cahill never mentioned that, the whole worst decision yet comment and remotely ready comments, ever mentioned that to Shaffer. And he talked about how, his CBI agents are, that's their opinion, but it's also his opinion because he's kind of like their supervisor. He talked about he described the marijuana unit as a tactical team. It's very physically demanding. He even heard of Cahill suggesting that he wanted to join this unit, so he wanted to put his name into the division. So they thought it would be a really good fit for Cahill to move to the marijuana unit. Okay, so the fifth witness is CBI agent head of major crimes unit, which is, this direct supervisor of Agent Graham as well as Agent Cahill's, and his name is Kirby Lewis. He started in law enforcement in 1987. Right at the time of the investigation, he was kind of like the third in line with CBI, the third head honcho, you could say. But now there's been like an assistant deputy deputy director for CBI, so now he's the fourth in line. He didn't start into the Suzanne Morphew investigation until 6 months into it. He felt like there was more work to be done, again, talking about the timing of the arrest of Barry Morphew. He wanted to get more substance and results. He said we needed more time to investigate. He even called Shaffer about the arrest, or even spoke with him in person. He couldn't remember which one it was, but he remembers he was doing that. He talked about how Speezy had concern that Morphew was going to flee the area. He never reviewed the arrest affidavit. He did have a conversation with District Attorney Linda Stanley, and it was about how she didn't want Cahill on the case anymore because of the testimony at the prelim. He claimed that he had never seen Cahill testify before. He wanted to keep Cahill on the case because of his knowledge. Like, he wanted to have him be a consultant, but DA Linda Stanley didn't want that. Sorry. And Agent Kirby Lewis made the statement that Cahill didn't make the comments about this is the worst decision yet and the case isn't remotely ready for an arrest. It wasn't until way after Barry Morphew was arrested in May. He did believe that there needed to be more done before the arrest. So that was kind of the end of Kirby Lewis on the stand. So the sixth witness was CBI Director John Camper. He runs CBI. He's the head honcho at CBI. He used to be the head of Grand Junction Police Department. He talked about, when does CBI get involved in the cases, and he said they're primarily a request agency. So a sheriff or a police chief has to request them to come help in doing investigations, and they might just ask for help with doing interviews, or they might just help with doing a crime scene. It's really a case-by-case basis. And they were called on May 11th, less than 12 hours after her disappearance. More than 15 CBI agents have been involved. He says in a given year, he calls a sheriff or chief about a case maybe 6 times. He reviewed the internal affairs statements. He had met Speezy before, so he called him, to ask him about, hey, could you hold off on the arrest? He even asked, could you give us even just 5 more days? Speezy doesn't know exactly why he asked for 5 more days. He said that Morphew was still speaking to his agents and wanted to keep him talking. Might eventually give inculpatory information, so he wanted more investigation, which is always helpful. Speezy disagreed on the phone and indicated that he felt it was best to proceed with the arrest. Concerned that Barry Morphew was going to flee, he wasn't concerned about that. This CBI agent and director, John Camper, was not concerned about Barry Morphew fleeing. He said if they need to find them, they would. He's read parts of the AA, but he does admit this is his first time calling a sheriff to halt an arrest. He was getting all of his information from Deputy Director Shaffer. Okay, Michael.
What?
Called Dax. He said the disagreement with law enforcement, like Speezy, was cordial. It wasn't, and this happens when they don't agree on something. But he admits that it was ultimately up to Sheriff Speezy, because he's the lead agency on this case, to make the decision on whether to arrest or not arrest. His concerns were merely about, the timing of the arrest. So the 7th witness was District Attorney Linda Stanley today. They talked about her history. She was elected in November of 2020, took office in 2021. they asked, her, when did you first talk to any investigators about the Suzanne Morphew case? And she said, I didn't reach out to investigators. I waited until they were ready to talk to the district attorney's office. And she said it was a couple months after I was sworn in that Speezy sent me an email and wanted to meet and talk about the case. They talked about how, there's multiple conferences that they would have with agencies before the arrest of Morphew. Notes were taken by the district attorney as well as the former district attorney, deputy district attorney Jeff Lindsay. And no CBI agent told her that they thought the arrest was premature. Now they talk about the preliminary hearing and how they had prepped Agent Cahill with questions prior to the preliminary hearing, and he had answered them. District Attorney Linda Stanley had said that he had answered them differently at the prelim than what they had done with prep. They talked briefly about her appearance on Profiling Evil podcast around April 30th. And she claims that she didn't answer any questions about the case on that podcast. Then they briefly talked about an email from Agent Megan Doogie about the CODIS matches, but she said she wasn't there for the CODIS meeting. Now the 8th witness and the final witness was Sheriff John Speezy of Chaffee County. Iris Eaton did not cross-examine Linda Stanley. It was another new attorney for the Morphew defense, but she did cross-examine Sheriff John Speezy and asked him, why a rush? He said there was no rush. And then, was there a concern that he was going to flee? And he said, it's always a concern. Do you have any hard evidence that he was going to flee? And he said no. And he asked, did you, and then Holbert asks question. He said, did you tell anyone about, concerns that he might flee? And he talked about the public safety, and he was asked if he ever got a call from CBI. He said yes, they were concerned about the timing of the arrest. But he had felt like it had gone far enough and that they were ready to make the arrest. And he didn't know why one of the CBI directors asked him for 5 more days, and he said he didn't know why that was asked. So now it's arguments, and they're pretty much saying, Iris Eaton, she's saying that there's been a stream of people not telling the truth. Their basis of their claims is what is exculpatory. She said that during the preliminary hearing, she would have called for more agents. And now 10 months later, they're getting this information through an internal affairs investigation about, CBI wasn't really ready for the arrest. And how, it doesn't matter whether or not they think the prosecution or investigators thought that the communication or this evidence would have been helpful to the defense. They said we needed to have it. They said in one of the, evidence dumps, they got 30% more data than previously. And they said, we are heading into trial, and they continue to violate discovery. And then Mark Holbert for the prosecution said there's been nothing new, Iris Eaton says there's been nothing has come down the pipes. They're still waiting to find Miss Morphew. It's a pattern of discovery violations. So they're pretty much saying, like, what are they waiting for to give us the discovery that we're supposed to have? And Holbert now takes and gives his argument. He says there are no patterns of discovery violations. We've been providing it as soon as practicable. They say that there's this grand conspiracy for having Morphew get arrested and for the murder of Suzanne. And he said if we were all in cahoots for this grand conspiracy, then all of our statements claiming the law enforcement and those that testified today, all the 8 witnesses, then they said that the statements would have been the same had them be in cahoots. We have disagreements on the timing of the arrest. There's always more evidence, and there could have been better organization. Yes, we admit that the clock starts ticking when the arrest happens. He said that I should have never brought up during the preliminary hearing about alleles because he said that was too complicated. I should have never done that line of questioning, especially with former Agent Cahill. I should have never gone there. He's talking about questioning involving the CODIS matches and the DNA. The statements, in regards to the statements from former Agent Cahill, no one said that when we were making the arrest, and those again are his opinions. He does admit that there has been issues from the FBI getting the data from the Range Rover of Suzanne Morphew. There has been a motion filed by the defense about the Range Rover data, and the judge is allowing a week for the prosecution to have a response, and then they're giving 3 more days for the defense to have a response to their response. As for now, for a conclusion from the judge pretty much said, I'm going to take in consideration all these arguments and the evidence, and I'm going to take them into advisement, and I'm going to order a written ruling. So that means he's going to make a decision, and it's going to be made public, and it's going to be in a written format. So the cases of interest page for this case, that's where you need to kind of check every day, I would say next week, to see if there's been an update from the judge on the sanctions and the dismissal of the case. That's where he's going to make his decision. So with that, I'm going to answer some questions, maybe a couple. Where is Suzanne Range Rover today? That's a great question. I believe that it was sold to someone in Indiana. Let's look at a couple more. Someone's asking if Linda is really being investigated. I'm not sure. This was the first time we'd seen Linda Stanley at a hearing for Barry Morphew since the preliminary hearing. And this was actually the first time we had heard from Sheriff John Speezy since the arrest press conference on May 5th of 2021. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to answer a couple more questions. Thank you so much for subscribing. This is the best way to get updates from me. I feel like I give more in-depth kind of look at my notes, because it sucks that we can't do Twitter anymore, and we only have a little bit of time before we have to go live for a newscast. So the reason why the domestic violence acts are not being able and admitted into the trial is because the judge claims that there's not specific dates and times of when those acts were committed, and it's just hearsay from a friend or a hearsay from a sister of Suzanne's. Someone's asking if law enforcement ever recovered Suzanne's bikini and towel, the brown towel that she was last seen in her last proof of life photo. And no, that has not been talked about. And no, I don't believe that has been recovered. Drew Nielsen was not in court today. It was a new person. I should have looked her up her name. Jane Byrielson. I'm butchering her last name. Yeah, someone's asking about Suzanne's own words, text messages. Those will be admitted because they have timestamps and they're Suzanne's words. So those will be admitted. Let me answer one more question, guys. Make it a good one. Yeah, people are asking if this is a different judge than the preliminary hearing. Yes, the preliminary hearing, it was Judge Patrick Murphy, and now it is Judge Ramsey Lama. All right, guys, thank you so much for subscribing. I will try to get to questions after, probably in the morning. I will get to more questions, but again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you missed earlier, kind of go back and rewatch it. Hopefully I can answer other questions too. And if you're asking, like, where do we find my latest reports, you can find them on fox21news.com. I will clip my video from our 9 o'clock newscast. That was kind of like the latest and greatest. So again, thank you guys all for tuning in and giving your Friday night to me and watching this video. Thank you. Bye-bye.